I was dead for 3 days, until my husband's mistress showed up at my funeral. I woke up in a hospital bed to find out I'd been legally dead for 72 hours. My funeral was scheduled for that afternoon, and when I arrived, still very much alive, I found my husband's mistress greeting mourners at the door like she was the widow. But I'm getting ahead of myself. 3 months earlier, I was living what I thought was an ordinary life in Charlotte, North Carolina. My name is Rachel, and I'd been married to Mark for 14 years. We had a comfortable life, nothing extravagant, but solid. Mark worked as a financial advisor at a mid-sized firm downtown. I was a kindergarten teacher at Oakwood Elementary. We had a modest 3-bedroom house in a quiet neighborhood, 2 cars that were paid off, and enough savings that we didn't worry about emergencies. Or so I thought. Mark traveled occasionally for work, financial conferences, client meetings, networking events, nothing that seemed unusual. He'd leave Thursday morning, come back Saturday evening, tell me about boring presentations and overpriced hotel food. I never questioned it. Why would I? Looking back now, I can see all the signs I missed. The way he started password protecting his phone 2 years ago. Work security policy, he'd said, and I'd believed him. The gym membership he suddenly got enthusiastic about, the new cologne, the nights he'd come home and head straight for the shower before even saying hello, but I was busy with my own life. 23 kindergartners who needed me every day. Lesson plans and parent conferences and classroom decorations. My sister Jennifer's ongoing divorce drama that I was constantly mediating. My father's declining health, early-stage Alzheimer's that meant weekly visits and doctor's appointments. I wasn't paying attention to my own marriage because I thought it was the one thing I didn't have to worry about. That changed on a Tuesday in October. I was driving home from school, stopped at a red light on Providence Road, when a pickup truck ran the light going 70 miles an hour and hit my driver's side door. I don't remember the impact, don't remember the sound or the pain or anything. The next thing I knew, I was opening my eyes in a hospital room with fluorescent lights burning into my retinas and a nurse standing over me looking like she'd seen a ghost. "Oh my God," she whispered, then louder, "Doctor! Doctor!" People rushed in. Machines started beeping frantically. Someone was checking my pulse, my pupils, asking me questions I couldn't process fast enough. "Mrs. Patterson, can you hear me? Do you know where you are?" My throat felt like sandpaper. "Hospital?" The doctor, a woman in her 50s with kind eyes and graying hair pulled back, looked at me with an expression I couldn't read. Relief mixed with something else. Confusion, maybe? "Rachel, I'm Dr. Keating. You were in a very serious car accident. You've been in a coma for 3 days. 3 days." The words didn't make sense. "We need to call your husband," a nurse said, reaching for the phone. "He needs to know—" "Wait." Dr. Keating's hand shot out. She looked at me, then at the nurse. Let's give Mrs. Patterson a moment to orient herself. Check her vitals again first." Something in her tone made my stomach clench. Over the next hour, they ran tests. CT scan, neurological exam, blood work. Everyone who came into the room looked at me like I was a miracle or a problem. I couldn't tell which. Finally, Dr. Keating sat down beside my bed. "Rachel, your injuries were severe. Traumatic brain injury, collapsed lung, internal bleeding. We performed emergency surgery when you came in. For the first 48 hours, you were on life support." She paused, choosing her words carefully. "Your brain activity was minimal. We told your husband the prognosis was very poor. You told Mark I was dying. We told him you likely wouldn't survive. That even if you did, the brain damage would probably be catastrophic." She folded her hands. "Yesterday morning, your husband made the decision to remove life support." The room tilted. What? "He signed a DNR order and authorized us to disconnect the ventilator at noon yesterday. We did. You were breathing on your own, but barely. Your heart rate was failing. We moved you to comfort care." She met my eyes. "Rachel, you were actively dying. We called time of death at 4:47 p.m. yesterday afternoon." I stared at her. "But I'm not dead." "No, you're not." She shook her head slowly. 20 minutes after we pronounced you, your heart rate stabilized, your breathing strengthened, your neurological responses started returning. By midnight, you were showing signs of consciousness. And now," she gestured at me, sitting up in bed, talking, understanding. "Now you're awake and cognitively intact. I've been practicing medicine for 30 years, and I have never seen anything like this." My mind was spinning. Where's Mark? Does he know? Dr. Keating's expression shifted. That's complicated. After we pronounced you deceased, your husband left the hospital. He said he needed to make arrangements. We haven't been able to reach him this morning. His phone goes straight to voicemail. What time is it? Just after 11 a.m.? Try him again, please. She nodded and stepped out. I could hear her in the hallway, the murmur of a phone call. She came back shaking her head. Still no answer. But Rachel, there's something you should know. Your funeral is scheduled for this afternoon, 2 o'clock at Westside Memorial Chapel. My funeral. They were burying me in 3 hours. I need to get out of here, I said, pulling at the IV in my arm. Rachel, you can't. You need to stay for observation. What happened to you is medically unprecedented. My husband thinks I'm dead and is about to bury me. I need to get to that funeral. Dr. Keating looked at me for a long moment. Then she did. Something I'll never forget. She pulled up a chair and sat down. Before you go anywhere, there's something else you should know. When your husband was here, before we disconnected life support, he wasn't alone. My heart started pounding. There was a woman with him, young, mid-20s, blonde. She introduced herself as a colleague from his office, said her name was Melissa. Dr. Keating's voice was careful, professional, but I could hear the judgment underneath. The way they interacted. Rachel, I'm a doctor, not a marriage counselor, but I've seen a lot of families in crisis. The way he held her hand, the way she comforted him. She trailed off. The pieces were clicking into place. All those business trips. The password-protected phone. The distance between us that I'd convinced myself was normal. If you want to see what happened when I showed up to my own funeral, please hit that like button. It helps us share more stories like this. Subscribe if you haven't already. Back to me. I checked myself out of the hospital against medical advice. Dr. Keating insisted on sending a nurse with me, a woman named Patricia who'd been there when I woke up and seemed personally invested in whatever was about to happen. I'm coming, Patricia said firmly. You just came back from the dead. You're not doing this alone. We took a taxi to the funeral home. I was wearing hospital scrubs because my clothes from the accident were destroyed, and I didn't have time to go home first. My body ached everywhere. I had a bandage wrapped around my head, bruises covering my arms, and probably looked exactly like someone who'd just survived a fatal car accident. The funeral home was a tasteful brick building with white columns, the kind of place that cost money. The parking lot was already half full. I walked through the front doors at 1:45 p.m. The viewing room was to the left. I could hear the murmur of voices, soft music playing. My legs felt weak as I walked toward the sound. And then I saw her. Standing at the entrance to the viewing room, greeting people like a hostess at a wedding, was a young blonde woman in a black dress. She was beautiful in that effortless way some women are. Perfectly styled hair, elegant makeup, confident posture. She was wearing my grandmother's pearl necklace, the one Mark's mother had given me on our wedding day, the one that lived in my jewelry box at home. I stopped walking. Patricia's hand gripped my elbow. The woman, Melissa, I assumed, was hugging an older couple I recognized as Mark's aunt and uncle. Thank you so much for coming, she was saying. It means the world to Mark. Rachel was such a special person. Was. I watched as she accepted their condolences with practiced grace, as she gestured toward the casket at the front of the room, as she played the grieving widow at my own funeral. Then Mark appeared beside her. He looked the part too. Dark suit, red eyes, exhausted expression. He put his arm around Melissa's waist, and she leaned into him. They looked like a couple who'd been together for years, comfortable, united in grief. I started walking toward them. People noticed me immediately. The whispers started like a wave. Heads turned. Someone gasped. Melissa saw me first. Her face went white. The color just drained right out of it. Then Mark looked up. For a long moment, maybe 3 seconds, maybe 3 hours, he just stared at me. His brain was clearly trying to process what his eyes were seeing. His mouth opened, but no sound came out. Hi, honey, I said. My voice sounded strange to my own ears. Calm, too calm. Sorry, I'm late to my own funeral. The room had gone completely silent. Mark found his voice. Rachel! Oh my God, Rachel! He rushed toward me, but something in my expression stopped him short. They told me you died. They said you decided to pull the plug. Yes, I heard. I looked past him to Melissa, who was frozen in place. Are you going to introduce me to your friend, or should I guess? Rachel, please, let me explain. Is that my grandmother's necklace? I asked Melissa directly. She reached up reflexively to touch the pearls. Mark said what? That I was dead so you could have my jewelry? My voice was getting louder. People were pulling out phones. I didn't care. How long? How long have you two been together? Rachel, not here. When did it start? The room was packed now. Everyone had come out to watch. My supposed-to-be funeral had become something else entirely. 2 years, Melissa said quietly. She wasn't looking at me. We met at a conference in Atlanta. 2 years, while I was teaching kindergarten and taking care of my father and believing my marriage was solid. And you, I turned to Mark. You were planning what exactly? To just move on with her? Inherit everything? How convenient that I was dying. It wasn't like that, he said, but his voice was weak. Then what was it like? Explain it to me. Explain to everyone here. I gestured at the crowd. I recognized faces. My sister Jennifer, my coworkers from school, neighbors, my father's caregiver. Tell them why your girlfriend is wearing my jewelry and greeting guests at my funeral while I'm still alive. We thought you were gone, Melissa said, and she was crying now. Real tears or performed ones, I couldn't tell. Mark was devastated. I was just trying to support him. Support him? I laughed, and it sounded unhinged. You're 24 years old wearing a dead woman's pearls. That's not support. That's something else entirely. Jennifer pushed through the crowd. Rachel, oh my God, Rachel! She threw her arms around me, and I let myself lean into her for just a moment. I'm okay, Jen. They told us you died yesterday. We've been planning. I don't understand. Neither do I said, pulling back to look at Mark again. But I'm starting to figure it out. Patricia had been standing quietly behind me, but now she stepped forward. Excuse me, everyone. I'm Rachel's nurse. She just woke up from a coma this morning and really needs to be resting. This has been quite enough excitement. Wait, Jennifer said, her voice sharp. She was looking at Mark with an expression I'd never seen before. Mark, when did you authorize disconnecting her life support? The doctor said, when? Yesterday morning. Jennifer's eyes narrowed. And when did you schedule this funeral? Silence. Mark, I said softly, when did you schedule my funeral? His face answered before his mouth did. You scheduled it before I died, didn't you? More silence, the kind that's louder than screaming. You were so sure I wasn't waking up, I continued, the realization dawning even as I spoke. You'd already made peace with it, already moved on. Did you even wait for them to pronounce me dead before you called the funeral home? Rachel, I had to make arrangements. How long before I died did you schedule this? Wednesday, Melissa whispered. She was crying harder now, mascara running down her face. He called them Wednesday morning, before they disconnected the machines. The room exploded. Voices overlapping, people shouting questions, someone yelling about calling the police. I just stood there, staring at the man I'd been married to for 14 years. The man who'd been so confident I would die that he'd scheduled my funeral a day early. Who'd brought his mistress to the hospital to hold his hand while they pulled the plug. Who was already wearing a suit and playing the grieving widower before my heart had even stopped. I think we need to talk, I said quietly. Privately. We went into a small conference room off the main viewing area. Just me, Mark, Jennifer, and Patricia, who refused to leave my side. Melissa started to follow, but I held up my hand. No, you don't get to be part of this conversation. She looked at Mark. He didn't argue on her behalf. In the conference room, under fluorescent lights that made Mark's guilt even more visible, the truth came out. 2 years ago, he'd met Melissa at a financial advisors conference in Atlanta. She was a junior analyst, ambitious and impressed by his experience. It started as flirting, then dinner, then a hotel room. I didn't mean for it to happen, he said, but the words were hollow. After that, she transferred to his Charlotte office. They'd been seeing each other ever since, lunches that turned into afternoons in her apartment, business trips that were just them in hotels, a whole relationship running parallel to our marriage. Were you going to leave me? I asked. He looked at the floor. I didn't know. I kept thinking I'd end it, but you didn't want to split assets, didn't want to pay alimony, didn't want the hassle of divorce. I felt oddly detached, like I was watching this happen to someone else. And then I had an accident, and suddenly the problem solved itself. It wasn't like that. Then what was it like? Jennifer interrupted. Because from where I'm sitting, it looks like you saw an opportunity. Your wife is dying, you've got a young girlfriend ready to step in, and all you have to do is pull the plug a little early and move on. I didn't. You scheduled her funeral before she was dead, Mark. He had no answer for that. Patricia spoke for the first time. Mr. Patterson, I need to ask you something. As a medical professional, when Dr. Keating discussed your wife's prognosis with you, what exactly did she say? She said Rachel probably wouldn't survive, that if she did, she'd likely have severe brain damage. Did she say it was impossible for Rachel to recover? Silence. Mr. Patterson? She said it was unlikely, very unlikely, but there was a small chance. So, there was a chance, Patricia cut in, and you authorized removal of life support anyway. You didn't wait, didn't give her time, She shook her head. I've been a nurse for 20 years. I've seen families make this decision. It's the hardest thing in the world. They agonize for days, weeks sometimes. They hope for miracles. But you? Her voice was filled with disgust. You couldn't wait to sign the papers. Mark's hands were shaking. I thought I was doing the right thing. For who? I asked. For me? Or for you and Melissa? He didn't answer. I stood up. My body was screaming at me to lie down, to rest, but I needed to finish this. Here's what's going to happen. I'm going home, to my house. You have 1 hour to pack whatever you can carry and leave. Jennifer will go with you to make sure you don't take anything that isn't yours. That necklace Melissa's wearing, that comes home with me. Rachel, please. I'm not done. Tomorrow morning, you're going to meet me at a lawyer's office. We're getting divorced. And Mark? I leaned forward. Given that you pulled the plug on your comatose wife so you could be with your mistress and then scheduled the funeral early, I don't think you're going to want this going to trial. So we're going to come to a very generous settlement. For me, I don't have to agree to that. You really want me to tell a judge this story? You want it in the news? Local financial advisor tried to bury wife alive? Because that's the headline we're looking at. How do you think your employer will feel about that? Your clients? His face went gray. That's what I thought. We walked out of the conference room. The viewing area was still packed. People were standing around in clusters, whispering, staring at the casket that was supposed to hold my body. I walked up to it. Inside was a beautiful flower arrangement, roses and lilies. But no body, of course. They'd been planning a closed casket service. Trauma from the accident, Mark had probably told people. I turned to face the room full of mourners who'd come to bury me. Thank you all for coming. As you can see, reports of my death have been greatly exaggerated. A few nervous laughs. I'm sorry you wasted your afternoon, but since you're here, I want you to know the truth. My husband has been having an affair for 2 years. When I had an accident and was put on life support, he didn't wait to see if I'd recover. He pulled the plug, scheduled this funeral, and brought his girlfriend to play widow. I looked directly at Mark. You almost got away with it. But you didn't, because I woke up, and now everyone knows exactly who you are. The room erupted again, people surging forward to hug me, to ask questions, to express outrage. I saw Mark trying to leave through a side door, Melissa already gone. Jennifer caught my arm. Are you okay? No, I said honestly, but I will be. The next 3 months were a blur of legal proceedings, media attention, and medical follow-ups. The story hit local news first, then went viral. Woman wakes up to stop her own funeral was trending on social media for a week. I had reporters calling my phone, news vans parked outside my house, strangers sending messages of support. Mark's employer put him on immediate leave while they investigated. Turned out, scheduling your wife's funeral before she's legally dead raises questions about your judgment and ethics. They fired him 2 weeks later. The divorce was brutal but swift. My lawyer, a fierce woman named Catherine, who'd heard my story and took the case pro bono, made sure Mark understood his options, settled generously and quickly, or have every detail of his affair and his attempted premature burial of his wife become public record in a lengthy trial. He settled. I got the house, 70% of our joint assets, his entire retirement account, and 3 years of alimony. His lawyer tried to argue that I was being vindictive, but Catherine just smiled and said, "Your client tried to bury my client alive. I think we're being generous by not pressing charges." They couldn't prove criminal intent. Mark claimed he genuinely believed I wouldn't recover. that he was making a heartbreaking but necessary medical decision. Maybe that was even true. Maybe he'd convinced himself he was being merciful. But the timing of that funeral arrangement, scheduled before the machines were even turned off, that told me everything I needed to know about what he'd been hoping for. Melissa lost her job too. The affair had been against company policy, and once it became public knowledge, she was let go. I heard through mutual acquaintances that they tried to stay together for a few months after everything fell apart, but it didn't last. Hard to build a relationship on a foundation that started with waiting for someone's wife to die. The physical recovery took time. I had months of physical therapy, neurological monitoring, follow-up surgeries. Dr. Keating stayed involved in my care, fascinated by my case. She told me I'd probably never know why my brain decided to restart itself after they'd called my time of death. Maybe it wasn't your time, she said. Maybe you had something left to do. The emotional recovery took longer. I went to therapy twice a week for a year, processed the trauma of the accident, of waking up to discover my husband's betrayal, of realizing how close I'd come to being buried alive while he moved on with someone else. But slowly, steadily, I rebuilt my life. I went back to teaching after a semester off. My kindergartners made me welcome back cards, and the pure joy of 5-year-olds was exactly the medicine I needed. My principal had saved my position, told me to take all the time I needed. Jennifer and I grew closer than we'd been in years. She'd seen me at my worst and stayed. That meant everything. My father's Alzheimer's progressed, and I spent my weekends with him. Sometimes he remembered the accident, sometimes he didn't, but he always knew he loved me, even when he couldn't remember my name. I started dating again eventually. Nothing serious at first, just coffee dates and movies and remembering what it felt like to be seen, to be valued, to be more than someone's convenient wife. Then I met David. He was a paramedic, actually, one of the first responders who'd been at my accident scene. He'd heard about my story about waking up and stopping my own funeral and reached out through Facebook to say he was glad I'd survived. We started messaging, then talking on the phone, then meeting for dinner. He understood trauma in a way most people didn't, saw it every day in his work, knew how to be present without pushing, how to support without smothering. We've been together for 2 years now, living together for 6 months, and last week, he asked me to marry him. I said yes, because here's what I learned from dying and coming back. Life is too short and too precious to spend it being small, being convenient, being less than you are, so someone else can feel bigger. Mark needed me to be simple, uncomplicated, easily replaced. He needed me to die on schedule so his life could proceed as planned. But I didn't die. I came back. And on the other side of that hospital bed, that funeral home, that divorce, I found a life that was actually mine. Not one I was fitting myself into. Not one where I was playing a supporting role in someone else's story. Mine. I think about that moment sometimes, standing in the funeral home doorway, seeing Melissa greeting mourners wearing my grandmother's pearls, watching Mark play the grieving widower, the surreal horror of it, the violation. But I also think about what came after. The strength I found, the boundaries I learned to set, the life I built from nothing. Mark sent me an email 6 months after the divorce was final. He'd moved to another state, started over, he apologized, said he understood why I hated him, hoped I was doing well. I never responded. Some people don't deserve closure. Last I heard, he was working at a small financial firm in Ohio. Single. Living alone. I don't wish him harm, but I don't wish him well either. I just wish him gone from my life, which he is. Melissa sent flowers on the anniversary of the accident. No card, but I knew they were from her. I gave them to the hospital where I'd woken up, told the nurses to put them wherever they needed flowers. The pearls, my grandmother's pearls that she'd worn on her wedding day at my own, those sit in a jewelry box in my bedroom. I don't wear them. Maybe someday I will. Maybe I'll pass them to a daughter or niece, tell them the story of the funeral that wasn't, the marriage that ended, the life that began. But for now, they're a reminder of what I survived, of what I refused to accept, of the moment I chose myself over everything else. I was dead for 3 days. Then I came back. If this story moved you the way it moved me, do me a favor and hit that like button. Share your thoughts in the comments. Have you ever had someone give up on you too soon? And don't forget to subscribe for more stories of strength, justice, and redemption. Because sometimes, the best revenge is simply refusing to die on someone else's schedule. and I'm never letting anyone bury me again. If this story moved you the way it moved me, do me a favor and hit that like button. Share your thoughts in the comments. Have you ever had someone give up on you too soon? And don't forget to subscribe for more stories of strength, justice, and redemption. Because sometimes the best revenge is simply refusing to die on someone else's schedule.